A very warm welcome to all of you joining us for this discussion and engagement and debate about youth issues. We're really very pleased to be welcoming young people and network representatives of young people from all over Africa and Europe. This is a discussion and a dialogue hosted by the Africa Europe Foundation to find ways in which we at the foundation are able to understand better expectations, needs, barriers, opportunities in ways that can actually matter for including not only the voice, but the actual actions and the capacity to make decisions around policy matters and others for young people, by young people. My name is Dharmendra Kanani. I'm Chief Spokesperson at the Friends of Europe, one of the co-founders of the Africa Europe Foundation. Before we go into the debate and discussion and interaction in earnest, let me say a few words about the rules of engagement. Those of you who will be aware of being in these, please make sure your screen is on, make sure your name's on there, and stay muted. And those of you who want to raise a question, a query, engage, use your virtual hand. You'll find that by the participants icon, and just log on, press on that, you'll see a little hand, press on that, that will indicate to me that you want to come in and you want to engage. I'd also encourage you to use the Zoom chat. We have just over an hour or so. Time always goes quickly, especially when we've got hundreds of people logged on that want to engage. So I want to make sure as many people can engage or raise their issues. And if you don't get a chance to speak, use the Zoom chat. And I promise you, we take that very seriously, record it. And where you have an issue, we'll pass it to the relevant person, whether that's a commissioner or a politician or the foundation. And we'll make sure you get an answer, okay? I also want to warmly welcome those who are on live stream, those who are not beamed in the studio right now, and warmly welcome you. And if you wish to raise a question or query, you have the same process, but you have to use hashtag Africa Europe Foundation. So it's hashtag Africa Europe Foundation to log your question or query or whatever you want to say, and we'll listen to it and find ways to include you too. So them's the rules. That's what we're going to be doing. So going back to the substance of today, we have one of the co-founders of the Africa Europe Foundation who's going to be saying a few words in a moment. He's someone who's a special personality in Africa, has done a lot, is very committed to young people's issues, and has made it his ambition to ensure that actually words matter, actual actions matter more than words. And so it's really important to him to be here to both engage with you, but to listen and to take on board what it is you're saying, so that can be fed into the work of the Africa Europe Foundation. You'll be aware that we were actually promoting the involvement or the speaking role for a commissioner, Urpilainen, who I've been doing a number of joint gigs with. Unfortunately, her and her fellow colleagues have been called away to Slovenia at short notice because of the start of the Slovenian presidency, and so she can't be here. She's very, very sorry that she's not able to be here, because she is very committed. And those of you who've seen me with her before will know she does turn up, but this was one of those situations where it was a 3-line whip from Ursula von der Leyen to actually go to Slovenia. So that's where we are. So, but she's very apologetic about it. But that's not a loss in that sense. And with all due respect, the actual people that matter the most are you. Those of you, and that sounds, I know, cliched, but I mean it. It's those people of you who are young people from all over that we want to engage with and learn from and listen, and also to be challenged by you, or we challenge you. We challenge each other, because that's the important thing about this, is not to be patronizing or paternalistic, but actually to listen and engage. This is about understanding, what do young people want from the relationship between Africa and Europe? What do you want out of the summit that's going to be happening next year? What should it be? What should be the priorities? What's missing? What hasn't worked for you up to this point? If you're a network leader or someone who's active, what's frustrated you most? What are the things that you'd like to see changed? If you feel that basically there's lip service and almost a kind of a good to see you but not to engage you type of approach in policy making by decision makers, say it. Say what you would like to see changed. That's the purpose of today. And hopefully we'll get as many of you in to this discussion. And the one thing I would urge you to do is, because this is human nature, we're all really good at describing the nature of the problem, i.e. not being listened to, not being heard, being kind of on the edges. What I'd urge you to do is say what you'd like. Do you have a solution? Do you have an idea? And let's focus on what they, as in leaders and decision makers, should be doing and what you'd like them to do, as opposed to what they're not doing. So thank you very much for joining us. I'm going to firstly warmly welcome Mo Ibrahim. Hello, Mo.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can hear you, sir. How are you?
I'm fine. Thanks. I had, well, we just met yesterday in the
Absolutely, absolutely.
So meet
Good
again
to have
today.
you back. It's good to have
Thank
you back. Tell us, share with us some of your, because you know, as I said yesterday, those who are logged in our conversation about cities, Mo's been someone that's been long in the tooth on some of these discussions about Africa-EU relations, someone very committed to action-oriented dialogue and a non-paternalistic dialogue, a balanced and equal and a mutual relationship with Africa and Europe. What are your concerns? What are your issues that you want to hear from in relation to young people on these matters of engagement and activism? Mo, over to you.
Well, thank you very much. I'm really not here to talk as much to listen.
Indeed.
We formed this foundation, the Africa Europe Foundation, last year as a follow-up from the high-level group of personalities which has been working for the 3-4 years, about 40 or 50 people from both continents. We try to see how we can better offer a bridge between the two continents. Europe and Africa are too close and they have a lot of shared history, and some of it was painful, some of it was better. But we really need to see how we're going to work forward and how we move on. It was apparent to us that is really there is a need. I mean, the connection, or the conversation between the two continents was limited to the African Union and European Commission, which was a little bit unbalanced, given that the European Commission, of course, has a lot of delegated authorities. I mean, the European countries ceded some areas of sovereignty to the Commission in areas like trades and international agreements, etc. This is not the situation with the African Union, of course. So that placed also some constraints on the discussion, and we thought it is important to have a much wider platform, and the conversation should involve civil society, should involve business, should involve young people and practitioners, different institutions. We need to bring on board the mayors. We need to, of both sides, we need, that informality also offer us the opportunity to be absolutely frank and honest. That's what we have been the reason for upgrading then the high level group, which remain as the parliament and the highest committee really in the foundation, because it drives the strategy. So we formalized this foundation late last year, and we had, of course, both commissions, the European Commission Africa, they're all on board, and they all blessed what we're trying to do, and they're participating in most of our meetings. We started also by forming 5 strategic groups, because we don't want just to have a talk shop and you know, the usual kind of think tank stuff, which is important, but I don't think it's sufficient. So we had 5 strategic groups. Each group is about 20-25 people from both sides. Those are professional people. Some of them are commissioners. the academics, civil society, business people, and they're tackling what we consider strategic areas in our relationship. Of course, on top of this now is health. So have a strategic group looking at the health situation, sustainable energy. We have 400, 500 people in Africa who are without power. This means those people completely out of any modern economy. And imagine living without power. Then we have, of course, agriculture, sustainable agriculture, the future of agriculture, the infrastructure, transport, sports, communications, etc., and also the digital economy, which we think is important, really, for future of Africa to develop our digital economy. These groups started to work, and the idea is to look at best practices and even to come with concrete suggestions about how things can be done, executed on the ground, because we need really to move on from talking to doing. And along all these streams, we're keen to have also the voice of young people. Why is that? In Africa, really, two-thirds of the population are below 25. Th- this Africa is really Africa of young people. And I think the future of Africa is in the hand of those young people. And I recall in our foundation, Mo Ibrahim Foundation, we have our own established network group. We call it the Future Generation Network, which composed of our scholars and our fellows. And early on, those young people were not happy. They said, "Hey, why you call us future generation? We're not the future. We're the now." So we had to change the name into the now generation instead of future
Yes.
generation
Yeah.
correctly,
Yeah.
because that's something we really need to focus on. Now, what I would like really to take out of this meeting, how do you how do you feel about the work we're trying to do? What your priorities? How do you feed into this discussion? One approach was to say that in all the strategic groups, we must have some young people, and we do that to ensure the discussion. In the last board meeting, we thought maybe it is better to have another strategic group, number six, which is really just focused on young people. What really issues are important for young people distinctively, like issue of education, training,
Yeah.
jobs, to focus on that area. And we are looking at all this. What's important really is to make sure you have a genuine voice, and that voice is influencing what is happening. So I'm here really to listen to your views, what you think, how we should approach our work, and what is important for you. So
Excellent.
the floor is yours,
Mo,
and I
thank you.
look forward to listen to your views. Thank you.
Absolutely. Mo, thank you very much. And as I said, as I said earlier, you confirmed you really want to be able to hear and actively listen and see what you can take forward from this interaction and dialogue. Mo said the future of Africa is in your hands. Do you feel that? Do you have that sense? Or do you think that actually that's the truth? Or is that just another political statement? Is it a reality? And if it's not, if you want to make it a reality, what needs to shift? And so I think in this Africa-Europe dialogue, how can young people foster the kind of links, the bridges, the support, the energy, and the capacity to work together on things that matter to both of you. Because actually, regardless where you are, there are similar issues, whether you're in Nigeria, Botswana, or in France, or Germany, or wherever. There are similarities which are undeniable and borderless. So firstly, I'm encouraging you, put your hands up. I want to be able to take as many of you as possible. And what I'd say to you is be good citizens to each other, because there's so many of you. What would be great is if keep your statements to the point, so I can then move on to the next person. We have a number of hands up already. I'm going to go to Merryl first. Merryl from, you're in Kenya, is that right? Merryl?
Yes, I am. Thanks for introducing me already.
Hello.
My name is Omondi. As you've mentioned, I am happy to representing the One Africa Europe Task Force, and we are a community of global activists from the One campaign who want to foster smarter and stronger Africa-Europe partnership. I'll be speaking on digital transformation today, and some of our critical pointers when it comes to supporting digital transformation across both continents include the establishment of a coalition for innovation and industry, in which we'll have 3 different tiers of membership, including startups as well as industry players, to facilitate the transfer of technology from both continents, as well as support research commercialization. Thank you.
Thank you. That was very short. What would be helpful also, Merryl, is that could you post on the chat the stuff you're doing? Because what's fascinating about watching this read is it's wonderful. You've got people from the Central African Republic, you've got people from Kenya, you've got people from Zambia, etc., all over the place making connections on this. And I think it's a really powerful process for everyone to kind of keep connected and keep the chat going. So do post stuff on there. So we have Gabriel, okay? Have I got that right? Is it Gabriel or Gabriel?
Either way, I'm fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Introduce yourself, would you please?
Of course. So my name is Gabriel Klaasen. I'm a 22-year-old activist from Cape Town, South Africa. I'm from African Climate Alliance, and I speak for myself today, but also for many of the young people in the organization I'm a part of. So in essence, what I'm kind of understanding, or what I'm feeling, initial thoughts basically, is that there is a lot of connection and similarity between Africa and Europe, but we must not get it twisted that there is a massive disparity between the two. And within Africa, there is not just Africa as a homogeneous continent, but rather we should actually look at the individual countries, and then further there, look at the different communities in those countries, because they are affected differently comparatively to the homogeneous viewpoint of many people that view it. I think that what we need to really acknowledge is, in this space, and I'm very grateful to hear what's being said already, but what we need to acknowledge is that in kind of dialogues like this, and in just discourse going forward, or just conversations going forward, the African narrative, in my opinion, needs to be pushed more. We need to be ones moving the movement of climate justice. Unfortunately, resources, capacity, empowerment is not on our side for the most part. And so we know what we need in Africa, and yet the solutions we get is very Eurocentric. And I'm very happy because I'm glad that this conversation happening, but one thing we can't get wrong is that, there is a disparity between the two, and
Gabriel, absolutely,
I'm
I totally
grateful.
agree with you. Yeah, no, please stay on. You're absolutely right, and people are shaking, nodding their heads. There is a disparity. We know that. That's historic. It's part of the history of colonialism, and we know all of that, right? And that's not to deny it. It's just to say we need to make sure that now there's a kind of a power that's created within Africa, a power that's with agency and with resources. And what you're saying is you don't want a narrative passed on by Europe. Obviously you don't. But in order to create your own narrative, what do you want? So you are a climate activist. What would make a difference for you? Tell me, is it money? Is it having a political leader behind you? What is it? Say what you would like so that we can take account of it. Okay. I know it's a tough question, Gabriel.
No, it's a tough question because oftentimes it's returned, or people turn to youth and say, cool, now fix the solutions or give solutions to the issues that we have caused. Okay. And that is kind of the issue. But if I were to say two things, one would be the fact that we are not empowered when it comes to resources, which means time, which means money. People aren't interested in many communities because, unfortunately, we are fighting for our next meal. And so that is the issue. So money is a resource, and time as well is a resource that I think needs to be pushed, as well as the fact that our voices are often looked at in a very tokenistic way. And so I definitely think elevation of people on the ground's voices, emphasizing BIPOC voices, Black, Indigenous, and people of color voices, as well as a feminist lens, and then of course resources on the other end to kind of elevate and push forward. I definitely think that that's a beginning start for everything.
Okay, Gabriel, thank you. And I didn't mean to suggest that you have to fix the problem.
No, I completely understood.
No, I know that. No, okay. It would but that's more. I think it's important that you are provided this platform to say, this is what I'd like. This is what I'd like to change, and you've done that. And I hope that people like yourself and others can go to other fora, which are those multilateral ones on climate action and change. I have Eleanor B.
Yes, thank you. I'm also from the One African Europe Taskforce. I am French, but originally, well, no, I'm French, but I live in Germany. So I'm dialing in from Germany. Really happy to be here. First of all, to briefly answer Mo Ibrahim's question on what the priorities are and what we want. In terms of the task force, the strategic group, that were created part of the Europe and Africa Foundation, I think what would be really interesting for the youth is not actually to create a sixth group focused on youth, but actually include youth in these high-level discussions and in writing this report. Because of course, all the issues that we talk about in all the strategic groups, they touch upon everything that the youth is interested in. So some of us went through the reports that were published by the strategic groups, and we found them really, really interesting, but we'd really like to contribute to the work directly by being involved in the conversation. So that was briefly to answer that question. I briefly wanted to talk about two priorities that we have talked about in our task force. So the first is job creation. It's clear that young people want one thing, it's jobs. And we know that in Africa, we need 22 million jobs a year to keep up with the population growth. But the difficult question is, how do we create them? And here we can focus on three things. First, creating wealth within Africa, so that's supporting the inter-African trade. So for instance, supporting the African Continental Free Trade Area, and also rethinking the EU's Economic Partnership Agreement. Second, we want to focus on improving the quality of education. Labor markets are going to change quickly with artificial intelligence, with the energy transition, and we need education reform that prepares the youth for the future. So that means investing in digital skills, creativity, critical thinking, and of course, promoting cross-cultural exchanges. And finally, promoting investments in future-proof jobs. So investment in renewable energy. Renewable energy actually has a higher job creation potential than investing in fossil fuels. So we really need to shift our mindset and recognize the huge potential in Africa, both in terms of the young workforce and the energy transition, and think about these challenges together. So that was briefly for the job creation, and if I may quickly going on to the climate change.
Very briefly, yeah.
Okay, I'll be very brief, sorry.
Thank you.
It's actually building on from what was said before. When it comes to climate change, we really believe that the African and Europe cooperation needs to be put through a decolonized lens. So that means centralizing the knowledge, the history, and the needs of African communities at the forefront of the partnership. So really investing in grassroots organizations, investing in local government through capacity building and knowledge sharing. These would be the main points. Thank you.
Okay, Ellen, thank you very much. What would be, just to very briefly tell us, you said mainstream young people's voices in the groups and in the report recommendations. Practically, let's just push this down into practical implications. Do you mean that they would share the reports with you at an early stage for your review and then for your commentary? Is that the kind of process you're looking for?
Ideally, be directly involved in the conversation when the report is being written.
Exactly. That's clearer and sharper, and people can listen to that and take on board that, because I think that means you're part of the process and not built in at the end. Manal Baum? I think Manal, is that Manal Baumi? I may have got your name wrong.
Benani.
I do apologize. Benani. Hello.
Yes.
Warm welcome to you
Hello.
again.
Thank you so much. My name is Manal Benani, and I'm from Algeria. I'm a medical doctor and an advocate. In charting my rise from an early debater to co-founder and ambassador of YMV program, pioneering dialogue in the MENA region and expanding it to Europe and Africa through contribution in exclusive meetings with Her Excellency Federica Mogherini, both in Europe, in Brussels, and in the Sahel region, and even in New York. To foster youth's role in peace and security, what I can say from the previous days of the forum and also today's session, that first of all, if we want to have youth at the heart of the policy making for Africa-Europe collaboration, we need to engage youth directly in those meetings, because in all of the strategies that have been put forward before, youth are only invited to lateral meetings, never the real meetings where policy making is done. So this is the first thing. Second, if we want to talk about the priorities for youth, we need to promote youth experts. We need to include youth in reporting, in analysis, and in research, so that we really get to know what are their concerns and what are the recommendations to put forward. And finally, we need to foster youth initiatives. If you want to promote education, whether access or quality education, if you want to enhance employment, we should support and foster youth initiatives, their startups, their solutions, whether it is related to health. Because, for example, now when we are in a pandemic, we don't see as many young health professionals sitting at the table and deciding. So it is very important to take that into account. Thank you very much.
Manal, can I just stop you for a second and just say, do you see the fact that there is something happening which connects you with other people in Europe and elsewhere, where you have an idea, for example, for tertiary education or primary education, which is digital, about creating a different frontline response to crisis because you're a medical professional? Are there those opportunities that are happening for you? Do you feel the call from anybody?
For instance, through the program of Young Mediterranean Voices, I had the chance through training, other young people in the region, in the MENA region, and in Europe. I had the chance to directly talk, to directly raise awareness, and to promote good practices, whether related to health or education. But there are no other initiatives currently because the program finished. But I would love if Africa and Europe Foundation would create something similar to that.
There's kind of opportunities for actual learning and dialogue, rather than just saying, we're not inside, we want to be inside. This is about actual practical solutions.
The real culture of dialogue.
Excellent. Manal, thank you very much. We have, I know that, thank you. Imtinen, Imtinen, you've been patient for a very long time. I'll take you in a moment. We have Mandipa.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me. My name is Mandipa, and it's fine, no worries. And I today am putting on the hat of both as a researcher at Leiden University and representing the Mo Ibrahim Now Generation Forum as a former scholar as well. I think we really need to internalize who we're talking about when we speak about the youth demographic in Africa. We're talking about a quarter of the world's labor force in less than 3 decades. And those of us that were alive in 1990 will caution that this is sooner than we think. And this is in the year 2050. Additionally, within the next 3 decades, 41% of the world's labor population will be young Africans. So we find ourselves at a juncture where Africa-Europe partnerships, in echoing what Eleanor said, need to be mainstreaming the youth conversation and, mainstreaming them in the conversations and the policies that are being drafted. So what plans are we making to best make use of the demographic socioeconomic impact? What plans are we making to best forge partnerships to make them sustainable? And I want to highlight 3 things. So we need a healthy Africa, we need an economically viable Africa, and we need a conscious Africa. And when I speak consciously, I speak politically and socially and climate change. So in talking about a healthy Africa, despite Africa holding 18% of the world's population, and this statistic comes from the Ibrahim Governance Report, Africa remains barely protected and squeezed out of the vaccine market. Let me put this bluntly. We cannot be talking about building potential partnerships when Africa is facing a grave vaccine shortage. So we need to be pushing that conversation forward. We can't be planning for corpses. A healthy Africa is a mutually beneficial Africa to Europe, with young people, especially young women, being on the front lines in Africa's informal economy. It's important that we take seriously that everyone must be vaccinated, because believe me, as we have seen in India, the dystopian ripple effects are widespread. COVID has shown us that capacitating healthcare system means capacitating all systems. It includes economics, agriculture, food insecurity, and so on and so forth, and it must be dealt with in a multifaceted way. Speaking on economics being viable in Africa, allow me to echo Dr. Yameru from ECHA, who spoke in yesterday's session on cities. We need to find opportunities in building markets with a social purpose, is what she said. And infrastructure development has been a top priority in many, many COVID restructuring platforms this year. But as I said before, we can't be building for corpses. We need to look for economic viability of Africa in a multifaceted way, which prioritizes healthcare and consolidates the data in which young Africans are working on the ground in. And as a researcher, I'd like to put a small commentary on that, in the fact that less than 1% of the research that is put out into the world comes from Africa. Yet we are doing our own research, but it just needs to be consolidated. Where can Europe help us in this regard? The consolidation and the mainstream of this through R&D financing and partnerships, European partnerships with research institutions of Africa already doing the work. A conscious Africa, a politically viable Africa that recognizes civic rights. Europe can help us in financing civic rights campaigns, in fighting for us in this regard, making sure climate financing goes to the people that are actually working at grassroots level. The Center for the Studies of Violence and Reconciliation has made clear the link between the exacerbation of conflict and climate change on the ground and how this affects young people. The BBC yesterday, I was watching a documentary, showed how this is affecting young people in Mozambique. Also, we need to look at how Africa is not homogenous, not just in what Gabriel was saying in terms of youth, which is absolutely correct, but in terms of the finance that is needed on the ground.
Mandipa, I have to stop you.
I am wrapping up.
No, but I want to listen to you forever. I just love this is lovely. The power of your data, the power of your argument, right? You know, it's great. You should have a platform, as many of you should have a platform, have world leaders listen to you and be arrested. And what I mean by is arrest their consciousness for a moment to really listen to what they need to do. But you know what I'd like is there's so many of you I need to get through, okay? And want to include. And what you're saying is very powerful. But Mandipa, what I want to know is that, you know, it's brilliant. You're saying speak truth to power, right? But specifically, what would be helpful, really helpful, is that what are the one or two things that could shift that? What about the African Union? What about you? What are the politicians on your side that you feel need to do? Because Europe can't be the savior of that. I know you're not saying that. I know you're not saying that, but you know there's a governance issue. What's the one thing that you'd like to see happen that might shift some of this? As you say, you can't plan for corpses, but actually the population is huge and, you know, significant for world development.
The population is huge and significant for world development, but, you know, I think we, especially, let me speak as an Our Generation Forum member, we have said everything that we need to say to our governments. And it's up to the people that we have spoken to, our lobby group leaders. Mo, you're sitting in the room, you know the conversations we all have had in the Now Generation Forum, the gaps that we need to close, we need to push that forward. And we need to get to a point where our leaders mainstream these conversations, mainstream conversations about infrastructure building, about building our capacity for governance and our institutions, because our institutions have a big problem. I mean, the African Union Transitional Justice Policy, which was adopted in 2019, didn't even include climate change, you know, and only now, I mean, in 2019, you didn't include climate change, and only now are these issues being brought up in 2021. So, I mean, we have spoken about these issues are being drafted on the continent. So it's about pushing that conversation forward.
All right, Mandipa, thank you so much. And I'm sorry to cut you off, but I've got hundreds, you know, loads of hands up, but that was powerful. And as all of your contributions have. Imtinen, you've been waiting for so long, and my apologies. Have I pronounced your name correctly? Is it Imtinen or Imtian?
It's Imtinen.
Imtinen, thank you. Thank you for being patient. Please have your say.
Hi, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to speak on the behalf of the Diaspora Vote program. So I'm a 25 years old fellow of the Diaspora program the Diaspora Vote program, which has been launched in 2018. So if I can answer briefly to the question, what are the priorities? We have been observing a lack of representation of racialized communities or people of color in the European institutions. So we are actually working on in collaboration with MEPs to address this issue and to act against discrimination and racism. So I think the main priorities are to give political participation tools in order to participate more and influence the EU, because there is really no representation of the diaspora. So for example, this program allowed me to participate on the European level, because here in France, we are facing a lot of discrimination. So I think working on the EU level is a very good opportunity for us everywhere in every European country as racialized people to work and participate and act, because I think the main point here is to encourage to vote and to advocate for more opportunities in the area of policy making. So yeah, thank you very much.
Imtinen, thank you for that. As you say, there's something about the words that leave the mouths of leaders can have a huge impact on life. And Macron's response to what's been happening in the past 12 months has had a direct impact on you and others in France. Absolutely. And I think the point here is how do you and others become networked to actually use the vote in a way that shifts this dialogue between just right and left. And there is a new community. It's not new, it's been there for many generations, but there's something about the power of the voice of the Muslim youth and other diverse communities within France to raise their voice to a different level, to actually create a different political dynamic. And I wish you well in that regard, and hope that people find the opportunity to support you and others in that respect. Paola, you've been so patient. I am so sorry. There's just a long line of people. So Paola, a very warm welcome. Introduce yourself with your question.
Hello, my name is Paola. I'm a One Youth Ambassador from Italy. And I just wanted to quickly follow up on what Mandipa was saying on the health issue. As we have seen, we have to learn from COVID-19 mistakes when it comes to access to medicines and vaccines. We have learned that there was a huge problem with global access to vaccines. And this is why, as young people, we ask Europe and Africa to start leveraging public finance. For example, when we invest in manufacturing or when we are de-risking the private sector, we want to translate these public funds into global access to medicines. And also I wanted to raise another point concerning health. We believe that young people should be included, for example, in interinstitutional exchanges between universities and institutions, health institutions in both Africa and Europe. We want to enhance this partnership, this participation, and make all young people more aware and active, not just as passive viewers of this partnership. Thank you.
Paola, thank you very much. In specific terms, what's you've obviously set out what the process should be. What's stopping that from happening from your perspective? What's the one thing that the foundation or a political leader or a decision maker could do to change that round?
I think that there are already many programs, but they need resources and implementing, they need visibility. And it's something that we as young people are advocating for, but it can't go on one way. We need also the support.
Of course, absolutely, absolutely. Because there is a tendency to say, actually, it's what Gabriel was saying, there is this paternalism that, you fix it, but not realizing that young people need to be able to be supported in their roles and journeys as advocates, as activists, and those who've been there before need to provide that support, if you like, to help learn the tricks of the trade, but also create your own voice. Thank you, Paola, for that. I want to perhaps at this stage, if I may, bring in someone from the European Commission. Martin, I know that you're there. I've seen you. I'd like to bring you in, if I may. You can't answer all the questions for the European Commission, I know that. It's a tough call, but this is quite a powerful voice, a set of voices you're hearing. Can you share with us what your reaction is, and what, say a little bit about how you think what you're doing right now in policy terms might be changing and shifting the dial on this dialogue of the inclusion and the active participation of young people in EU-Africa relations?
Yes, thank you. I think the participants who spoke so far have already put the finger on the problem, which is the fact that despite the fact that the world today is very young, it's clear that we are not giving them enough space to be heard or to participate, more importantly, in decisions. And that's the basic problem. My Commissioner Urpilainen, has been very clear from the start of her mandate. She wants to address that, and she wants the EU's international partnerships to engage with and empower young people, and not just through words, but also through actions. I just mentioned two quick examples. We have decided to increase our commitments on education in our external action from 7% to at least 10%. The Erasmus Plus now fully benefits from a dedicated initiative program that sets the vision and objectives for next 7 years. The allocation there is 1.8 billion euros. So concrete examples, but it's also important not to see youth just as beneficiaries. As has been already stated, youth need to be and must be at the decision-making table. And we in fact have organized ourselves to provide this structure. As you all know, we have set up the Youth Sounding Board for international partnerships to also advise us. We need the advice of youth on how to shape all our policies. And I'm very happy to say there's been tremendous enthusiasm for this. We've received more than 4,000 applications. And I can tell you it was quite a task to select 25 very talented and committed representatives of youth from that community. But our intention is that this would be a hub, a real hub for fresh and innovative ideas, but not just here in European decision-making, but also we would encourage our delegations, for example, around the world. Some of them are already replicating this idea on the ground. Zimbabwe, Senegal, for example. I know others like Nigeria will be doing this soon. And I would really encourage all the others to actually do this. Commissioner Urpilainen has also nominated a special advisor for youth, Bitania Lulu, who has emerged as a leader and team player in many youth-led programs in Ethiopia. There is tremendous momentum right now. I mean, just a few days ago, we concluded our European Development Days, where young leaders figured prominently among the panelists. The Africa-Europe Foundation was also there, participated very actively in the organization of the events. 50% of the 46,000 people who connected were under 35. So it's clear that the youth are very much engaging in this. And as you also know, we have a youth action plan for our EU external action ready for next year. Very briefly, a special word about Africa. I mean, Africa and Europe are increasingly interlinked and will be even more interlinked in the future. And this is why this relationship is so important. And if we look at Africa, as has already been mentioned, 3/4 of the population there is below 35, 40% of the population is under 15. So if we are talking about a real partnership, a true partnership between Europe and Africa, we have to be talking and listening, more importantly, to the youth. And this is happening. Much more, of course, needs to happen. We have carried out surveys recently, which show that on the one hand, 91% of all respondents would like to be involved in the decision-making process. But, and this is also very important, 2/3 of them claimed not to have access to decision-makers. So this is something we need to fix, and we have to change that. We are working very much hand in hand with the African Union, how we can both organizations can mainstream youth and co-create policies which are tailored to and designed by youth. Let me just mention very briefly the AU-EU Youth Cooperation Hub, bringing together young people from the two continents to design and develop projects. Hundreds of young people are involved locally in pilot projects, which are unfolding in 17 countries in Africa and Europe. to the benefit of an estimated 150,000 young people. So, you know, lots of examples, but of course, this is still just scratching the surface. There's so much more that needs to be done. And, you know, I'm very happy also to hear all the ideas already coming through so strongly in this session. Thank you.
Martin, thank you very much. And it is a tough call asking you to come in this contest, because actually a lot of your peer group should be here listening, in fact, which is not a criticism of you, but actually they need to be listening to this dialogue, so they really understand how the institution needs to be thinking differently and adopt a different mindset of how it engages with young people per se, but also young people of color and diversity and intersectionality. And, you know, this is a worthy dialogue in that regard. But I suppose the issue here is that at some point, the ways in which Europe has been a pathfinder, a leader, whether it's to do with, you know, strategic autonomy, GDPR, looking at its foreign trade agreements, it could do something around youth in terms of actually shining a light and leading the way on how you actively engage young people as a part of the process rather than just a consultation mechanism. And I think we need to move away from stark data. You know, the data is very powerful, but I feel that we might be continuing to quote that data for the next 5 years, and it'll be too late. But I know that's not your intention. But Martin, thank you for coming in. I want to invite Bitania. Have I got that right? I know others are waiting.
Yes, you did get that right.
Hello.
Hello, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Warm welcome to you.
All right. Thank you very much for having me.
Tell us where you are and say what your questions are. Introduce yourself.
This is Bitania, the newly appointed Special Advisor on Youth to Commissioner Urpilainen. And I'd like to start by applauding. I'd like to start by applauding the EU Director General for International Partnerships for the commitment they've made in putting youth at the center of international development and partnerships. These should be replicated in all levels of governance and also decision-making as well. So I'd like to start with diversity of youth. When we talk about youth, we need to know that that's not a homogeneous group. We need to take into account that youth are different with their gender identities, their religions, their disabilities, living conditions, their locations, the social disruptions, such as war, ethnicity, sexual orientation, and their varied access to infrastructure. So when we try to include these wide pool of youth, we need to also take into account their diversity. And as beautifully already said, the demography, 1 in every 6 person globally is between the age of 15 to 24. And of course, it's been said that the African population, 75% of it is under the age of 35. So this proves that the future development and roadmap of the globe will be shaped on the basis of how best young people are engaged now. They're not the young people are not the leaders of tomorrow, but they're the leaders.
So Bitania, now. Absolutely, Bitania, you've got this role. Okay, so you're on the thing. So the one thing is that all these young people are going to be listening to you and watching you in the way they're watching other leaders, because you're there. You've got a seat at the table, therefore. And I suppose people who are watching, are you going to adopt the bad behaviors of the leaders around you, or what are you going to ask differently? So say a little bit about what you're going to say in terms of what you want from the Commission. I know that's a tough call.
It is a tough call, but meaningful engagement in youth goes beyond just giving the voice for young people. It needs to be institutionalized so it can be sustainable, and also embedded in systems in the different member states and development partners in Africa to enable sustainable youth leadership, participation, and to facilitate youth collaboration with other generations and inclusion of them in all layers of governance and decision making, which is in research, design, planning and implementation, and also evaluation phases. I would suggest, I would advise the Commissioner and different development partners to first create awareness on existing policies that affect youth amongst the youth. I would also advise that there would be age and gender segregated data to understand the different needs of young people, research-driven advocacy, and also capacity development to create more institutions that equip young people with adequate digital skills, and as well as explore new approaches of formal, informal, and non-formal educational cultures, which in turn will boost the financial literacy of our young people in both continents.
Excellent. Bitania, thank you, and good luck, and thank you for responding to my challenging question, and we really wish you well. But you know, having been long in the tooth, having created so many kind of forums in the UK, one of the things you have to watch out for is you don't start imitating the worst of leadership behaviour, and to maintain your own is hard. It's a tough one, but I'm sure that people around you will make you ensure that you are grounded to that originating purpose of why you want to be there. So thank you very much. There's many of you on work through in terms of the hands that are up, but I want to put a couple of people on notice that I'm going to bring you in, and that is Mary Fitzgerald and Samir Abdul Karim. I want to bring you, and also Sabatu, who was there yesterday. I'd like to kind of hear your voices from the different perspective at some point, but I know that we've got Jonas, Mohammed P, and Jonas first. You've been very patient, very patient.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, I have several points, but I try to be short. So everybody else can come in as well. So yeah, first point would be definitely that there is still a big gap between reality and actually what has been said. So if you combine over the week of these meetings, that basically the meeting today with all the youth voices is 1 hour, and the other ones were 1.5 hours, which basically shows that there is still not a level of equality between the voices of young people and leaders. And if you want us to get to the table, you need to start at some basic points, which are basically these. And the other points. Well said. Carry on, go on. The other points that I would strengthen would be basically really based on Mandipa's points and a bit on Gabriel's, which were really great intakes basically. So first of all, it would be that we help shape the narrative around youth in Africa and Europe that portray Africa differently in Europe. So we basically highlight Africa's strengths, opportunities and resources and not see them as opposed to a weak partner. And what I would really recommend is that we basically invest into a youth leadership fund, which would be financing youth initiatives as part of the Africa Europe Foundation, and into an African Europe Youth Advisory Council. Because if we look at the last African Union EU summit, it was kind of at the sideline of the main meeting. And if you really want to take young people's voices into the main discussion, I would recommend to also make them part of the main discussion and the main table as well, to really bring in their points and have a young perspective on that. And I think as the staff of Commissioner Urpilainen already said, it's a good start, but I think it's really that we need to get to the point to really give youth an equal voice and an equal platform to speak up. Thank you.
Well done, thank you very much. And thank you for spotting that point. You're absolutely right. Why is this only an hour? Why isn't it an hour and a half? And but what we'll do is I have a little bit of control. I can carry on. So as long as you want to stay, I'll stay. Okay, we can make it up to 90 minutes if you're up for it. Okay, so we can do that. But you indicate that, and I'm happy for us to real time. It's not a big decision, but let's make that decision.
I will leave that voice for my fellow participants, because there's so many that will probably have great points to say. So I think that they should also have the point to stretch.
Absolutely. So let's do that. Let's absolutely do that. We have a number of you. And before I move to let's say I think Taman and others were online, but Mary.
Thank you, Dharmendra, and thank you all for...
Please introduce yourself.
Yes, of course. My name is Mary Fitzgerald. I'm a trustee of Friends of Europe, and I'm also an old veteran of the European Young Leaders Program at this point. So I've engaged with some of the MENA region, the Euro-Mediterranean programming at Friends of Europe as well. And it's been fascinating to hear all your thoughts and observations. I'd like to make some comments in terms of the kind of conversation our two continents tend to have with each other, and some observations in terms of future conversations. And the first one is, I work on Libya. I'm a journalist and researcher specializing in Libya. And I'm often struck by the fact that people tend to talk about North Africa, the Maghreb, as if it's somehow separate from sub-Saharan Africa, treating the two as in separate silos. And I think this is very often the case in the way Europe approaches the continent. as not so much a continent as a whole, incorporating North Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa, but those particular silos. There have been a lot of Euro-Mediterranean initiatives where particularly bringing together Southern Europe and the North Africa Maghreb region. But I think we should really kind of push for an approach that incorporates that Euro-Mediterranean approach as well as the approach and engagement with Sub-Saharan Africa. So treating Africa as a continent as a whole. And I'm aware of these divides, if you like, as well on the continent, that sometimes North Africa is perceived as different histories, etc. So I think having a conversation that brings that together, particularly from the European perspective, is useful. The other point I'd like to make is Mo mentioned at the beginning the often very difficult history between Africa and Europe. Gabriel made a very important point at the beginning as well, where he talked about how Africa as a continent is not homogenous. We're talking about many different countries with distinct historical trajectories, et cetera, et cetera. It's the same with Europe. Europe is not homogenous. And I think that one of the aspects we're seeing in the conversation between our two continents is renewed interest in decolonization, talking about the history between the two continents in that respect. And I think what's important to remember is in Europe, countries have very different histories on this. I'm from Ireland, and Ireland was never a colonizer. In fact, Ireland was colonized itself for 800 years. So Irish people tend to have a very different approach to this issue. They tend to have, the country, Ireland, tends to have a very different engagement with the continent of Africa because the histories are very different. So that, I guess, is a plea for nuance in our conversation, and a plea for a conversation that goes kind of beyond perhaps more simplified ideas of what our shared histories have been. So observations, as I said, in terms of the kind of conversations we have going forward. Thank you.
Mary, and also I noticed there was a kind of someone who made reference to the Arts Council initiative on new narratives. You are also part of the Arts and Culture Working Group for European Young Leaders. And there's something here about how are those narratives that are shaping young people's lives, both in Africa and Europe, could be made something of. You know, there are journalists like you who'd support and artists on both sides of the continent that could actually provide the kind of glue of association through arts and culture to create those narratives quite powerfully so, no?
I agree. You know, we all know that one of the most powerful ways of reaching people and formulating new ideas is through storytelling. And that's the case on both continents. And I think there's real potential there in terms of harnessing the power of storytelling, shared storytelling, storytelling that includes, you know, stories that we bring from our own different perspectives, historical perspective, contemporary perspectives, and that. And we are seeing something of that, but I think more needs to be done and can be done. It's a huge area of potential.
Absolutely, thank you, Mary. And you know, and I applaud what I read in terms of what the British Council is doing, but perhaps expand it, make it an Afro-Europe kind of initiative around, you know, new forms of storytelling and bridge building. I want to go to Abiy. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you. Yes, thank you very much. Hello, everyone. This is Abiy. Currently, sustainability and peace researcher, and currently based in Leeds, representing also the Now Generation Forum. There's a lot being said, but I just want to pick up on what Mary just said last on the issues of bringing arts and culture into defining new, co-creating new shared visions collectively. And I think let's focus more on that forward-looking aspect. This is one of the topics that really excites me, and I see a lot of potential in bridging the various gaps we've come from, the various perspectives and contrasting perspectives we come from. And let's start from what we did right in this forum particularly. I mean, sometimes we focus too much on the gaps. Let's start with the basics now. We have come to this networking in which we're listening to each other. We have good institutional backups from the Mo Ibrahim Foundation, from Friends of Europe, One Campaign, all of these great institutions and networks coming together. Now, how do we now honestly build the conversations moving forward from here? And I haven't heard the topic topics particularly related to cultural renaissance. How do we openly talk about cultural restoration? Because one of the concept notes key deliverables is redefining the new narratives, rethinking the partnership between Africa and Europe. And key to that for me is having that discussion on cultural restoration and how we can create open data platforms where we can track the progress on that end. The second thing I want to focus on is the, when coming back to the issue of climate change, let's talk about the nexus of businesses and sustainability. How do we transform large corporate businesses into becoming part of the solution? The role of government is for regulation and formulation of policies. Activism does its job in voicing out the concerns, but the real challenge, the real key issue is through businesses and how we transform them into becoming part of the solution. The other point I want to focus on is the digitization. How do we harness the benefits of AI and big data for Africa? Or is it going to be another source of marginalization? Is it going to be, because I feel like there's a potential for Africa to leapfrog along with Europe in partnership to seize this new future, a knowledge-based economy where we can not just focus on the infrastructure deficits that Africa usually is referred to, but let's see how we can embrace away from this pro-growth economy, which is not making people happy, but let's focus on a forward-looking and how Africa can harness the benefits of AI and digitization, job creation, that's skills that are fit for the future. Last but not least, before going, let me just say, the power of media governance, the power of arts and creatives in shaping new visions, collective visions is powerful. And I really want to follow up on Mary's, I'm really interested in what Mary's work is doing on that end, because we're also interested in that aspect. So thank you very much. I think this is a good progress.
Don't go yet. Good. Yeah. Abiy, thank you for raising that point. And I think you make the point well in terms of, how do we then build on this? And so if you have any specific thoughts, you should say, because this is a platform. This is a platform for it. And that's what the foundation wants to hear and learn about what can it do purposefully and meaningfully that's going to make a difference. And, and my apologies for raising the issue about arts and culture, but I know that Mary's in that group. And I think it's a missing point in this narrative, in this conversation, that we know the power of arts and culture. So I think those of you who would be interested in that, just put it in the chat, and I'm sure Mary and my colleagues can look at that by bringing that kind of, let's say, new narrative making in Europe and Africa. And because I think that, those of you who are in different parts of Africa, the sheer talent is mind-boggling. It's mind-boggling in terms of what people do with television, etc., fashion. But we also know there's a lot of skilled talent in terms of IT, in terms of digital and AI. It's about how do you make sure those people who are currently in Africa with that talent, who are young, can be supported to create their own markets and support that. I want to move to I want to let you know, I have Burak, who's been really waiting for a long time. Marius, I know you've been waiting. Mohammed, Simangele, and Lilith. I will be coming to all of you, I promise, as we now have more time. Those of you who are going to stay. So, Burak, good to see you.
Hi, Dharmendra.
Hello. Do introduce yourself and to the folk around this room.
Yeah, my name is Burak, and I'm joining from Germany. I'm also a young Mediterranean Voice alumni and was working in Brussels before. I think many things were said, and I would like to just build up on a few things, what my colleague Manal said, and also on Mary. Regarding the Mediterranean, I think it's a very interesting because it is partly Africa and partly Europe. And I think the experience in the Mediterranean region with these programs, projects, leadership seminars could be enhanced towards Africa and Europe, to two continents. And I remember that we had this leadership seminar in Malta 2 years ago, where we were around 20 young leaders and 10 foreign ministers at the meeting. And it was quite challenging because my colleagues were quite unexperienced in that sense, but when they went into the exchange and conversation with the foreign ministers, we could see the challenge also by the diplomats and decision makers on the other side. And I think if you want to create a more balanced decision making, and bring more solutions in the Africa-Europe relations, we could enhance multilateralism and bring young people in different forums. For instance, the upcoming EU summit in 2021, it could be a good chance to bring young leaders from both continents on the table, and also to repeat what Gabriel said. I definitely agree that we need to depatronize the way of thinking on Africa from Europe, and I think there would be a good way when we bring leaders from Africa to the European Commission, in Merryl or von der Leyen and others, to see what's happening in the ground in conflict regions in different areas of African countries. And I also want to send my sincere gratitude to Jutta Urpileinen's office and the cabinet that they created the special advisor for youth, because we advocated for it in the last 2 years. And I'm really, really thankful for that. Yeah,
okay.
Thank you.
Burak, thank you as ever, and thank you for following these discussions and bringing that perspective, as always, into debate. Mohammed R, I should say, because there's quite a few Mohammeds here, so my apologies. Hello.
Oh yes. Hi, I go by Mohammed Rami. I'm from Cairo, Egypt, and I'm representing Generations for Health. So I think that one of the biggest kind of elephants in the room here is to talk about brain drain. I think that it's remarkable that the EU is putting more financing behind the Erasmus program and everything, but I think we also forget that that's also an opportunity for a lot of African youth to build a better life elsewhere, and to really consider that. And so how can we empower the continent, with that form of education that is led by African countries and led by the continent itself? And so I think, what I would like to see is kind of educational programs, development programs that are supported perhaps by the AU, that, outline strategic careers or areas or sectors and policies where, the African youth can contribute to after going through these educational programs, perhaps in Europe, but also within the continent. And, with these scholarships, the people can then come back to their countries and be able to support in developing, whether it's policy development, whether it's business idea. And so that's one thing that I think we can really see. The second is the idea behind perhaps an EU financing for something similar to MIT Solve Challenge, but with a focus on the African continent. And so that can bring something for the youth to be dedicated to, whether it's business or policy. And that way you develop African talent.
Okay, sure, absolutely. Would you want that administered independently, or do you want the governments from both sides to administer that particular initiative?
I think
so basically the MIT goal. So, what would you like?
No, and I generally believe that that's one of the more difficult questions, because it's a question between private and public. But I do think that this needs to go into the public sector, and so this would be led by the governments, because, like we always say, the African countries need to delineate where are the policies that they need help, or where are the sectors that need help. And that, needs to go to, we need to be empowering the governments and be able to empower the youth to solve, those kind of problems that they want. And so that it's not the idea, just behind what Europe wants to see, but that way, the decision-making can also go back to those who are affected the most.
So Mohammed, thank you very much. If you've got to put it on the chat very specifically, here's a recommendation.
Yes,
the MIT thing.
It.
Put it in, see what kind of reaction you get, because people can listen. There are lots of people here that might be able to create the magic that can happen potentially, and you never know the connections that can happen to make it a reality. I want to go to, and I know Marius, Dennis, I can see you've been very patient. Before I come to you, Marius, Simangele?
Yeah, thank you so much. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Hello, warm welcome to you.
Yes, great to see you again. The name is Manal Benani, South African based in Kenya. My colleagues have touched a lot in youth engagement, but I wanted to add that in addition to creating spaces, institutions for youth to participate, we need to invest in the skills as well that young people need in order to be able to participate adequately into these policy processes. This includes writing political interventions, policy briefs, and so on and so forth. I've seen in my own experience in South Africa, currently there's a government notice on the conservation and sustainable use of rhino, lions, and elephants. I know it's a topic that is emotional for a lot of people, but most often you don't find young people responding and writing to those things. It's only once decisions are made, then you get the public uproar. So I think in addition to opening the spaces, also invest in the training for young people of how to effectively engage in the processes and how the processes work. And the last point I want to touch is there's a big discussion of building back better. One sector that I would love to see us elevating going forward is the biodiversity economy, the sector that recognizes that biodiversity is an important asset to be protected, but as well it can respond to some of the socioeconomic issues that we are facing as the continent. And as well, knowing that a majority of human diseases come from animals. So protecting nature and using it sustainably is part of the solution in some of the health, unemployment, other challenges that we face in the continent. Thank you.
You make a really important point, and we lose sight of that. Is that how do you create the software capacity? And what I mean by that is the exchange of how you activate yourself. How do you lobby effectively? The writing process, the networking process. We assume you're just going to kind of imbibe it and breathe it in. It is so wrong and it's so patronizing. You actually need to create networks of support to understand what good lobbying is, and how do you create the right punchy approach and create movements and communities. So really a point well made. The only thing I'd say is that, I get your point about building back. I have this personal sense of the notion of building back. I don't want us to build back. I actually want us to build forward and have a different kind of future that's very much more that we imagine that we would want it to be, rather than thinking about what we had in the past, because actually that was a bit of a rotten model. And perhaps we want to think differently and reimagine differently. I'm running out of time, but I want to bring in some people before I wind up. I have Marius, who's been so patient. Dennis, you've been patient, and Masuka. So, and Rogers. So I'm going to start with you, Marius, first. Okay, and I need you all to be really quick, and I'm going to take you all one after the other. Go on.
Okay, thank you very much, Dharmendra. I'm Marius Cevelli, joining from Italy, President of Sustainable Cooperation, Peace and Security, and Young Mediterranean Voices alumnus as well. So I wanted to point out something about peace processes, because I've been involved in different peace building programs, long-term programs, one-year programs, in different countries of the world. And what I have seen, many colleagues of mine, they are only Europeans or North Americans, but I've never seen Africans going abroad like this, doing one-year programs, coming to Europe, staying 1 year in Italy or 1 year in Germany or another European country, learning peace building process in this country, learning how civil society organizations are working in these countries abroad. So what I would like to point out that we need to create a joint program of Europeans and Africans, where they have this exchange, Europeans going to Africa 1 year, in different African countries, and African young people coming to Europe in different European countries, working for different civil society organizations, so they can learn about the best practices of these countries. And we can start in a small scale, for example, 100 young people from Africa going to different European countries, and 100 Europeans going to different African countries, and it won't cost that much. I think for the European Commission doing a program like this, it will be around 2-3 million euros per year. But we can
okay, you've even priced it. It's lovely, Marius. Thank you, because I've literally got so many people, and I need to close up very soon. But yeah, put that on the chat. I think it's not always about money, is it? Actually, this is a virtual forum where you can make connections. Yes, absolute human contacts are key, but these things could be happening very quickly. Before I come to you, Dennis Masuka.
Thank you very much for. No problem. Thank you very much. My name is Masuka Ba. I am a Senegalese and I work for the African Development Bank as a private sector development specialist. And I am a member of the Now Generation Network by the Mo Ibrahim Foundation. So maybe just quickly, I'll try to go as fast as I can. I know there are many people waiting. So my first proposal is on how to integrate youth. And I believe there was this idea of having a separate youth commission that will talk within themselves on all youth issues. But as someone has highlighted, youth are interested in all of the issues that are on the table. So maybe there could be a possibility of having some mirror committees for each strategic group. You would have a strategic group that is exclusively composed of young people from the different networks. Then they will be able to really discuss among themselves deeply the different issues and bring them back to the main strategic group. So that was just one addition that I had in mind, having a way of having these separate committees on each priority issue discussed solely and exclusively among young people. Because I think we come here, I was very happy to be here, meet other people from other continents. It's not always an opportunity that we have. So that is already one. I also support very much what Marcus has said, or Marius, about the exchanges, not just Africans going to Europe, but also Europe's coming to our universities and experiencing our reality. So that is one. Now on the sectoral focus or on the issues of priority, I see that there is a strong focus on anything related to green transformation, sustainability of food systems, etc. And it is very great, and it is something that is needed. But at the same time, I feel that it somehow reflects much more the priorities of the Friends of Europe than the priorities of Africans. From where I'm sitting, anytime I'm in a debate, the first thing that comes up is that Africa has to industrialize. It is no longer something that we have to push aside. It has to be done. We have to have manufacturing companies creating jobs, because we know that with the population dynamics that we're all seeing, we have so many young people that will not all be entrepreneurs. We have to have some system of creating sustainable jobs. And those jobs will be in the manufacturing sector. And we know the numbers are quite disappointing when it comes to manufacturing in Africa, because we still export our primary resources, not only to Europe, but to also other partners such as China. But because of the particular relationship we have with Europe, we want European companies to come and invest directly in Africa, having much more FDI coming in and setting up those manufacturing companies here. For example, when we take the Congo Basin, for example, we know that it is really what you say, le deuxième poumon vert. I'm sorry for switching in French, but it's really the second lung of the planet. And that we really need to sustain that forest. And the experts will tell you that it's not just by using less paper or not cutting the forest that we're going to make it sustainable. We have to use the forest in a way that it delivers economically, socially, and environmentally. And up to now, these countries have been harvesting the forest. In many of the countries, except for Gabon, the countries are exporting logs, and then they're also importing, furniture, etc. And we know that in Europe, they have the expertise. There are lots of SMEs and large companies that are there in Europe and that are already in wood processing. Maybe we would benefit from having some of these companies come and establish plants in Africa, so that they're no longer just importing logs from us, but they're importing at least semi-processed products. And it's happening in some countries. For example, in Gabon, they have banned the export of logs, and they are exporting some primarily processed goods, but we need to move higher up in the value chains. And that's really what we want from a partnership with Europe. We know that Europe has its own strategy on securing critical materials, and some of these critical materials are bauxite. That is not mainly, but one of the main providers of that is Guinea. But I'm sure, I have Guinean friends, I'm sure they don't want just to export the bauxite raw to Europe. So as part of securing those critical materials for Europe, we want those companies to come here in Africa. Yeah. We want our youth to be trained, and we want these goods to be at least produced to have at least some level of industrialization before they move to the other international markets. So those were really my main points, and I'm happy to contribute more.
I'm so glad you came in, and I'm so glad we extended the time, because your points are brilliantly made. You know, economic parity doesn't come from economic self-interest, and you know, we need to have a very different approach to how the partnership works, and the fact that sometimes you do need to have that sense of self-determination, but understanding what serves you best in whether it's Guinea, Nigeria, Botswana, etc. Not simply the words that say we want a equal partnership, but in fact, nothing really changes in the extraction of raw material and who benefits the most. And so we do really need to think a mindset difference needs to take place in practice. So thank you for, and the last point I make very briefly is that, you know, sometimes you don't have to have mirror groups or strategy groups. Look at the power of this. There's been over 160 of you connected. This could happen regularly. Let the leaders come to you. Let them come to listen to you. Why not? Why do you want to go there? Just my thought and passion about this issue. But, you know, sometimes self-organization is happening right now. And you could demand the attention of folk to come to listen to you around a whole range of topics. So think about that. I need to wind up very quickly, but Dennis, Rogers, and Adelaide, I'm going to take the last three of you before I wind up, because you've been so patient. Dennis.
Yes, thanks for the opportunity. My name is Dennis. I'm Kenyan, but based in the Netherlands. I work for a company that provides global IoT connectivity by use of satellites.
Great.
And on the side, I also work, I'm part of the EU Youth Hub, the digital cluster. So naturally, you'd expect I'm quite passionate about digitalization, which is the case. So this one's more like a piggyback on what Abiy mentioned, which is the utility of digitalization to leapfrog, which is basically moving forward and bypassing pre-existing technology and taking advantage of the latest and greatest technology out there because of the lack of baggage, quote unquote, of legacy infrastructure. So digitalization is obviously pretty strong in doing this, because not only does it have a multiplier effect, but it's also low cost in terms of infrastructural investment. So I'd like to drum up support for more direct digital investment in digital technology, and not just because of the financial / economic benefit of it, but because I believe it's going to take care of the elephant in the room, which is the cultural problem that we have, well, challenge that we have, which is, as you mentioned, 75% of Africa is comprised of youth. But then I believe we break records in terms of the oldest average leadership age. So the natural consequence of that, yeah, the natural consequence of that is, of course, it's an old boys club and nobody wants to listen to what the youth have to say, because what experience do they have in life? But then, yeah. As everybody knows,
you're making the right points. You know, I can see Mo laughing, because you know that's very passionate about and very close to his heart about the you know, the demographic of leaders in Africa. And boy, do they have staying power and corruption power, as do some of the leaders in Europe and elsewhere in the world. This is not simply an African issue. But thank you. And you know what's really interesting about what you say is that we heard yesterday at the city's discussion where we had Daria talking about investment and creating investment tools and instruments. There's ways in which we should bridge this, you know, and connect you, because I think getting homegrown tech capability and IT skill set in Africa will be the thing that leapfrogs the rest of the world. But it's about having not belief, but access to money, because the skills are there, I believe. But thank you for making that point. Taman, you've been so patient. I have Taman, Rogers, and Adelaide.
Okay, thank you very much.
Very briefly, yeah?
Yes, I will be brief. So I wanted to speak about the importance of getting jobs, training, and actions for the protection of the environment. And for this, having a look at the European Green Deal, because it aims at reducing by 50% the emissions of the European Union before 2030. But the solutions rely often on solutions which will have a negative impact in African countries, thinking about, for instance, just electric vehicles and the relationship with the minerals which are being extracted. So I believe that we need, I'm French and I live in Senegal right now. In Europe, we need to have a look to face our colonial past in order to see what are the bias which may still remain for our histories and from our policies. So for that, I believe that the actions which could be taken in place would be, for instance, to have an independent audit on the European Green Deal right now through a racial justice lens, which is a solution proposed in the Equinox report that I really advise to read towards climate justice.
Can you put that on the chat? Because I think it's a really specific policy ask. Actually, you know, that they do a lot of other impact assessments before they bring out things, but this one would be a really interesting one to do a racial and economic impact in, you know, in that way, the way you're describing.
Exactly. I put the name of the report on the chat, and my two other brief propositions are maybe to actually support the transformation of climate solutions into businesses, because there are activists, there are solutions which are being forgotten right now, especially in African countries, and the knowledge needs to remain in our generation. And for that, I believe that it would be interesting to rely on the EU representations in African countries to support the expertise getting lost, to support trainings on agriculture, on textile, which are being lost right now. If I just take the example, the very brief example of for instance, the second-hand clothes case. Right now, the clothes of Europe the second-hand clothes of Europe and of other regions, North America, etc., are being exported mostly in African regions. And by doing so, it just compete with the local knowledge on textile, which are being forgotten. And this knowledge can be an opportunity for jobs, and especially for youth. So I believe that transforming solutions and transforming knowledge into businesses for young people, taking into account that there is a need of creating jobs for the young generation, especially in Africa, is important. Thank you very much.
Thank you. No, thank you for making it. And so I'm going to take just two final, Rogers and Adelaide, if you're still patient and you're still there.
Thanks so much. My name is Rogers. I'm joining from Kenya. I'm part of AU Europe Africa Taskforce. I'm also one champion in East Africa. Basically, I'm so passionate when it comes to youth engagement, meaningful youth engagement. And I do agree with all that have been said, but I really wish to emphasize on issues to do with mentorship and issues to do with political spaces. I believe young people should be mentored and they should be allowed to take political spaces, because this is really missing. Because when we talk of engagement and empowerment, they are totally two different things. We're always getting empowered, we're always given information, but when it comes to engagement in these positions, into policy spaces, young people are still lacking. Anyway, thanks so much for the great opportunity.
And Roger, you make a really important point. You made it really quickly. Political mentorship and active, understanding what it is to be active politically is key. And sometimes we lose sight of that. And also it's making sure that those who you wouldn't expect to get the mentoring are part of it. It can't just be those from well-heeled backgrounds with great opportunities. You need to make sure those who are in the rougher end or the sharper end of society also have those chances to become politically active. Adelaide.
Yes, thank you very much. So hi, I'm Adelaide. I'm representing the African Union Diaspora Youth Initiative. I don't know if you can hear me well. And also the ACP Young Professional Network, which is a member organization. So I want to start by answering one question you asked earlier on. Do we need money? Yes, we do. And it's just about the money. It's not just about the money. It's about how we get this money. I think the issue at the moment, as I've said many times, the system is not allowing young people to access, especially young people, grassroots organization, to access funding. What we need is a youth fund on different topics, and this comes out from many consultations that we have conducted. We need to have focused youth fund for education, for culture, for whatever, that are supporting ongoing young people's initiative, because the current system is not even accessible to local organizations. The second point is on diaspora inclusion. I think it hasn't been mentioned at all today, and although the diaspora is often mentioned as the bridge, it's forgotten in all the text, the legal text. I want to remind, beyond the fact that in the transfer of money that the diaspora does through remittances, the diaspora is also often the first respondent in time of crisis. So there is a lot of as you see recently in the Goma situation. So I want to point this out, but I also want to point out a promise that was made in 2017 in Abidjan for a platform to reduce remittances where the profits would be used for the youth fund. I think we need to come back to that because during the COVID crisis, which like many other crises, that's the time where the diaspora tends transfer more money, while the cost of transferring money has really increased. And so we are losing a prospective fund. And since we're talking about the Africa and Europe relationship, I think Europe must be also ready to hear from Africa when we say this. So the people of African descent in Europe are disproportionately economically and socially disadvantaged. And this really, if you look at in a bigger picture, you realize that in fact we are losing potential transfer of money that could be done because of that. The last point really is on the vaccine that was mentioned. Sorry.
Go on, I'll let you. Absolutely go for it. Come on, very quickly.
Yeah, sorry, very quickly. I think the mobility issue has been mentioned earlier, and we really advocate for mobility, north-south mobility. And but there's a growing concern with the vaccine that the vaccine will be used to limit mobility from the south to the north. I think we should not use this EU passport that's been put in place to limit mobility. We need to strengthen this relationship, and part of this is really to stop limiting our mobility and our exchange north-south. Yeah, thank you very much.
Adelaide, thank you. And to all of you who've still got your hands up, I'm so sorry. I just can't, I have to stop. As it is, we build for an hour, we've gone to an hour and a half, and the technicians are looking at me saying, enough already, we need to walk out of the room because it was only built for an hour. So I do apologize. But this has been so powerful. This has been really effective. Mo, do you want to come in? I don't know, you don't have to. I was just thinking in case you want to, you can. Otherwise, I'll just, wrap it up.
Well, thank you very much. I think it was very interesting discussion. I think it could have gone in for 3 hours maybe. Interesting points. Very quickly. Digitalization, which people talked about, digital economy. We have a strategy group really focused on digital economy because we understand that is very important. So as far as the foundation, yes, that's part of our key work. The interesting points raised about education, training, skills, and arts and music. Right, these areas are not covered, and maybe that was one issue behind my thinking, that we should have a stream of young people added to strategy groups, because none of the groups there are dealing really with the issues of arts and music or even training, and it will be touched on, of course, when we will talk about developing agriculture or developing infrastructure. Of course, we're going to talk about education, but to have a specific forum to discuss, I think is useful. The suggestion that some young people should be involved in the strategy groups, that already is done. And a number of people in this call are already serving on some of the strategy group. One just final thought, when we talk about leadership and young people, I really want to say it is in your hands. Nobody gonna come and knock at your door and say, come on, here, you are the new president of the country, or you are the new, no, nobody's gonna do that. You need to organize yourselves. You need to be part of the political process in the country. If you are a political party, you'll be the largest party in Africa. You'll be leading every single country in Africa. But of course, that is a very simple view because people have different political ideologies and different. But what I'm saying is you have the demographic way to influence the democratic process in the country. And if you use that effectively, you can force your way through the door. Unfortunately, that's how things work. You need to force your way through the door and to make sure your issues are in the high agenda because you have the power of vote. And just use it. Organize, get, really, of course, everyone has their own narrow interests, whether it is arts or whether it is philosophy or whether it is music or whether it is health but we need to be involved really in the wider issues of the country and where our countries are going. And for that, you need to be involved in the political process. So I just really suggest you organize, connect, get active, be a force, and don't ask all people like me to open a door for you because we don't have the keys. You have to remember we are also civil society ourselves, and we're trying to influence, we're organizing to influence the decision makers. But thank you very much for this lively discussion, and I look forward to see all of you again. Thank you very much.
Mo, thank you very much. And those powerful words about recognize the force that you have and you hold. It's not always hard, but actually, my goodness, just imagine the power, the political power, but also the social and economic power that's in your hands. Easier said than done, I know. But anyway, lots of ideas, and there's a lot of faith here that you could actually be hopeful and optimistic about the future, given the voices that are on this room. And I know that you represent only that much of what's potential out there, because there are millions of you, hundreds of millions of you out there with the same kind of thought. Thank you. This has been a really stimulating, thought-provoking and fun conversation. I hope you felt so too. We're going to continue these conversations, and there will be another one in September. So keep an eye out on the website, and obviously colleagues will be sending you information, but these dialogues will continue on a more regular basis from September. It won't just be one-offs. And this conversation built on a set of dialogues from last year. So you can see there's movement, and we're trying to make sure that it gets better and better. I hope you feel. So all it leaves me to say is thank you very much. Take care of yourselves. Have a good summer. It's been great to see some of your faces from the past. I'm glad you kept with the journey. Look after yourselves, be strong, and mind your distance. And see you again soon after the summer in September. Take care. Bye-bye.